More proof of the strength of experience.
Some good form and smooth moves on tap tonight at the Fairlanes Bowling Center in Des Moines. Fairway Food Store employees don their bowling shoes and aim for the pens, trying to knock down as many as possible to raise money for the Muscular Dystrophy Association tonight. Every year, bowlers gather to raise money for the upcoming MDA telethon held here on TV8 Labor Day weekend.
And that's our news tonight. Thanks a lot for being with us.
Good night.
It's a heat wave of fresh new entertainment with the CBS Hot Summer Season. Get outrageous with the comedy of Howie Mandel. From the creator of the A-Team, Lee Majors and Jeffrey Meek get fired up in the martial arts adventures of Raven. Lee Horsley leads a team of investigators through steamy crimes in Bodies of Evidence. Coming soon, the sizzling stories of co-ed life in Freshman Dorm. And the real-life drama of all-new 48 Hours and Street Stories. It's an all-new Hot Summer Season on CBS.
As a seasonal farm worker, you may feel that the doors to opportunity are closed without the education or job skills employers want. Many jobs seem out of reach, but there is help. Proteus Employment Opportunities. Proteus is a free service to Iowa farm workers who need assistance finding full-time employment. We provide basic education, job training, and placement services. With our help, you can start opening doors to a better future. Call Proteus today.
Meet Zog Bones. Zog is a cave dude. He likes to ride on the walls, which I guess you can do if you live in a cave. Zog has friends just like you do. Well, kind of like you do. Anyway, you can bring your friends to see Zog and his friends. So catch Zog Bones and his colossal losses at the Science Center of Iowa.
Steve Carlin on TV8, Iowa's news leader.
We now join the CBS network, the program already in progress.
Future date if Saddam Hussein continues his defiance.
While the diplomats talked, U.S. armed forces were positioning within striking distance of Iraq. Settlement or no settlement, the United States wants Saddam Hussein to feel the pressure. CBS News Pentagon correspondent David Martin reports.
Despite Iraq's apparent cave-in, the U.S. began a slow buildup of its military forces within range of Iraq. The aircraft carrier Kennedy was ordered to cut short a port call in the Virgin Islands and head for the Mediterranean, where it would join the carrier Saratoga. A third carrier, the Independence, is already in the Persian Gulf. Almost as important as the planes aboard the carriers are the hundreds of cruise missiles aboard the cruisers and submarines which make up the battle group. In addition, the Air Force already has roughly 100 planes based in Saudi Arabia. Still, U.S. forces are only a fraction of what they were for Operation Desert Storm. And administration officials made it clear today that if airstrikes are ordered, it will be more like a drizzle than a storm.
Any reaction has to be measured to be proportionate to what he's doing, which is very, very serious. Not excessive, but certainly not below the threshold to get his attention and thus compel his compliance.
But Defense Secretary Cheney made it clear that Saddam Hussein himself would be considered fair game.
We're not in the business of targeting individual foreign leaders, other than to the extent that they serve as part of the chain of command. And in a military setting, in the midst of conflict, the chain of command is a legitimate military target.
In the event Saddam tries to fight back, the U.S. is also prepared to send Patriot missile batteries to protect Kuwait from the kind of Scud missile attacks launched against Saudi Arabia and Israel during the Gulf War. Iraq may think it has diffused this latest crisis, but Pentagon officials say they expect to continue with preparations for military action, if nothing else, as a means of keeping the pressure on. David Martin, CBS News, the Pentagon.
And from inside Iraq, Saddam Hussein continues to hurl defiance at both the UN and the U.S. Harping back to his war cry of a year and a half ago, Saddam said that the mother of all battles is not over. Saddam appeared to be preparing his people for the possibility of more airstrikes, even as the problem appeared to be diffused.
Secretary of State James Baker returned to Washington Sunday night. Baker returns from a round of shuttle diplomacy in the Middle East. His next role may be to ride to the rescue of the Bush re-election campaign. Now, some suggest, including Democratic candidate Bill Clinton, that if Baker were to resign from the State Department, his gains in foreign policy may be lost. His direction may be settled this week. But with Election Day not that far away, current Republican leaders are having their problems agreeing on a vision for the future. CBS News correspondent Bruce Morton has more.
Gentlemen, start your engines!
Vice President Quayle had a good time at the Talladega 500 and formally shifted his own campaign into high gear, telling reporters he's on the ticket for sure this fall.
It's a closed issue, past tense. The president has never wavered on this issue, privately or publicly, and we're going to win this campaign.
Would dumping Quayle have helped or hurt? Some experts think it wouldn't have mattered much, one way or the other.
America understands they vote for the president, not for the vice president. You could take them both off, put them both on, replace either one. The result at the top of the ticket will not change.
One other switch may not happen either. Will Secretary of State James Baker take over the campaign? His deputy today said no.
I'm saying that Jim Baker will be the Secretary of State for some long period of time. And all of this speculation about his departing within the next week or 2 weeks or 3 weeks, I think is nonsense.
That may not matter either.
I don't hear about Jim Baker when I go. I hear about President Bush.
The Republicans head towards their convention with one unresolved issue, abortion. Abortion rights leaders know they can't change the anti-abortion GOP platform, but
it is not the platform that threatens our pro-choice candidates. It is the public perception that all Republicans are the same on this issue.
What worries many Republicans isn't the ticket and isn't abortion.
It's the economy, and I don't think the economy is going to change enough between now and November, so we've got to make some statements about what the president's got to tell us, you, me, and everybody, why he wants to be president for 4 more years.
A lot of Republicans are saying the problem isn't Quayle or Baker, it's George Bush, and what he needs is the thing he used to make fun of. He needs to communicate a vision of where he wants to take the country in the next 4 years. Bruce Morton, CBS News, Washington.
President Bush says the nation's anti-drug fight is making progress in reducing demand for narcotics, especially among young people. Mr. Bush met with the head of the Partnership for a Drug-Free America Sunday and says he got a very positive report on the war on drugs.
Pope John Paul II appeared to a cheering crowd in Rome on Sunday. It was the first time the pontiff had appeared in public since surgery to remove a tumor 2 weeks ago. On Saturday, the Pope's surgeon said the 72-year-old pontiff no longer needed constant medical care, but he could use a few more days of rest.
And we are back with more in just a moment.
This is CBS News, up to the minute.
Starting pitcher like me feels safe driving one of these. Even he can run faster than this thing will go. It's not like there are a lot of other things to watch out for. Hey, watch out! But you don't drive to the ballpark in one of these, and you don't drive home in it either. So if you plan to drink, plan ahead. Line up a designated driver. Someone will get you home safely. Because driving out there is a whole lot different than driving in here.
In 2 years, the Red Cross has responded to more major disasters than ever in our history, but we depleted our reserves. We must raise millions of dollars to help disaster victims this year. Perhaps we helped you once, or a friend or a neighbor. If disaster strikes, we'll be there with food, clothing, and shelter, but we depend on voluntary contributions from people like you. Please help us today so no one is left helpless later.
During the Gulf War, the National Guard and Reserve were a vital part of our military effort. All because of their training in management, operational skills, and teamwork. The same kind of training that makes them better when they come back to work for you. When your employees need time off to serve, be a hero and give them the freedom to protect ours.
You might think people with the AIDS virus look sick, but most don't. It can be years before the symptoms show up. So if you have sex, don't take any more chances than you have to. Use a condom, because you can get AIDS from someone who looks perfectly healthy. That's how I got it.
Last week, the eyes of the world were redirected toward Iraq as Saddam Hussein once again stood firm in his defiance against the U.S. and the UN. As the new week began, however, the Iraqi leader followed a course of action many had expected, caving in on an 11th-hour compromise. Saddam agreed to let UN weapons inspectors enter his Ministry of Agriculture. And just how is the United States reacting to this deal? Well, for his part, President Bush appears less than convinced that his newest crisis in the Gulf is over.
While Saddam has bent to the will of the UN, the question remains whether after this delay a truly effective inspection of the ministry is still possible. The real test of his behavior will be in future UN inspections. Behavior along the lines we've just witnessed will not be tolerated. Saddam has long pursued a pattern of willful non-compliance and obstruction of the United Nations Special Commission. For over a year, he has lied about the extent of Iraq's weapons of mass destruction programs and sought to conceal them from the United Nations and the International Atomic Energy Agency.
It appears that the so-called compromise may not end the tensions between the U.S. and Iraq. Here to help us understand what the implications are to all this is Dilip Hero, author of Desert Shield to Desert Storm. Mr. Hero joins us from our Washington bureau. Sir, thanks for being with us here on Up to the Minute. First question for you. In your mind, why do you think Saddam Hussein waited until the 11th hour to say yes?
Well, it's not a question of waiting that long. There are basically 2 points involved here which are different from the previous such instances. One is that the UN insisted to enter a building which is a civilian ministry, which they have not done before. And secondly, now that we're entering the era of presidential election in America, Saddam Hussein wanted to test the will of the Bush administration, and that is why he raised this particular resistance to the demand made by the UN, and that's the main reason why this has happened.
Kind of walk us through what will happen on Tuesday when the UN inspectors go to the Agriculture Ministry.
Well, I think going by the reports that we have, the reports are that there is inside this building a whole sheaf of documents which will inform the UN about the procurement program of the Iraqis for their unconventional weapons program. And the other theory is that there are some machines inside that building which can be used for the manufacture of ballistic missiles. Now, if it is the question of documents, then of course by now I expect that the Iraqis have removed the documents or shredded them, and or they have made microfiche copies of these which can very easily be smuggled. If it's a question of machinery, then of course it will be difficult to remove them, but on the other hand we have to remember that for the past 3 days this ministry is not being watched by the UN inspectors, so this has given enough time to the Iraqis to remove the incriminating evidence if that evidence was there in that building in the first place.
From what you know about Saddam Hussein, what percentage would you put on the likelihood that that machinery was moved out if in fact it was there in the first place?
I think the machinery may be a bit difficult. I expect there are probably, if there are probably some documents, and of course the documents are very easy to destroy and documents are very easy to copy, and that the chances are that probably there is something. You see, the main thing Saddam also was very determined about this position because they feared that, okay, this time the UN wants to go to this agriculture ministry. Tomorrow they say we want to go into the presidential palace. And the Iraqis feel that the U.S. administration is looking for the movements of President Saddam Hussein so that if they know these in advance, then he can be assassinated. So this has been the fear of the Iraqi government, and that's why they put up this resistance.
Let me go back to something you said last February. You said this to the European edition of Newsweek. In response to the question, how secure is Saddam Hussein's hold on power, you responded, if he is in power for another 6 months or so, then he will probably continue much longer. We are coming up on that 6-month period that you talked about. Do you think Saddam Hussein is in for the long haul?
Yes, I think when I mentioned 6 months, basically we're talking February, 6 months means August.